All right, I'm so happy to be meeting with Peter Montgomery from the Right Wing Watch. We are going to be talking about the Jericho March that took place. So, welcome, Peter, back to Mindship Podcast.
Thanks. It's always great to talk to you.
So, we've got so much to talk about. I mean, I could not wait to chat with you because obviously you've been on the show before. We had an absolutely amazing Mindship Zoom call in November. I got a lot of really good feedback from people on that. So, thanks for coming back in on the Zoom call, too. It was really enjoyable.
That's great. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. So anytime you want to come back, we'd love to have you come back in. There's so much to talk about. I'm interested in, okay, so this Jericho March, this happened on the 12th of December, just a few days ago, really. What
Saturday.
can you tell us about it? Because I know you were live tweeting and watching it pretty closely. What was it all about?
Well, this was all about people who think that Donald Trump won the election in a landslide and that it was stolen from him by, some combination of forces of evil.
Right. Okay.
So they are still hoping to overturn the results of the election. They are still hoping to put Trump back into the White House, even though their record in the courts is miserable and their legal options
That's
have
right.
dwindled to just about zero. But so this was the rally itself was a motley assortment of right-wing activists, kind of far-right people, uh, religious right folks, mostly from the Pentecostal wing of the religious right, but also right-wing Catholics, right-wing Orthodox Christians. It was a really mixed bag. And then with a guy named Ali Alexander, who's a right-wing activist who has sort of started this Stop the Steal movement.
Yeah.
They're having rallies in states. And then the Jericho March is a Pentecostal activist and a conservative Catholic activist who both said that they were given visions of God from God right after the election, that they needed to get people in the streets. And so they've been holding prayer rallies at state capitals every day since the election. So that was the group who pulled it all together.
That was the overview of it. I did a search on YouTube the other day. I mean, I'm familiar with Jericho marches, but I wasn't familiar with how far back this thing goes because one of the things that came up was you remember Trump's famous stunt. I don't remember when it was, several months back, where they cleared the protesters in front of Lafayette Square and he posed in front of the church with a Bible. And some Christians who support Trump called that a Jericho march. They said Trump's doing a Jericho march. And it's a thing in charismatic churches. They'll actually circle around the church auditorium. And what's the context? It's the biblical story of the walls of Jericho tumbling down, marching around the city 7 days in a row, and then on the seventh day the walls came tumbling down and they conquered the city. So that's where it takes its sort of precedent from, isn't it? The biblical story.
That's exactly right. It's the biblical story. And, very few people mention that what happened next in the biblical story after the walls came down was that they slaughtered every living thing in the city.
Yeah,
So
genocide.
it's a little troubling that gets lifted up as the
Yeah, that's right.
story for what now, they talk about it metaphorically that they're bringing down the walls of corruption, but it's good to know that full context.
Exactly. That's, as a biblical scholar myself. Yeah, of course. I'm familiar with the Jericho story. I preached it many times, going through the book of Joshua, Judges, and there's some really horrifying accounts of genocide in the Old Testament that apparently, according to the text, God commanded. So yeah, people are asking, now, wait a minute, if you march around, and is it like you say, metaphorical? Is it an allegory? What is it? And they say, no, we're metaphorically, as you say, the walls of corruption. They're going to overturn this election and Trump's going to be reinstated in 4 more years. Of course, now here we are. It's Wednesday, the 16th of December, and the Electoral College has cast its votes, and it's officially over for Trump, isn't it? Or is it?
Not for these folks, because
right. Not
we
for
have
them.
such a convoluted system here with the Electoral College. So Monday, the electors who were picked by the voters met in every state, officially cast their votes. And so, yes, now Joe Biden is officially president-elect. But according to the system, on January 6th, all those state electoral college votes are transmitted to the US Capitol and counted and sort of officially accepted by Congress. And so now that is the focus of right-wing organizing, is trying to mobilize pressure on Republican members of Congress to object to the certification of those electors. They're also still working on state legislatures, but they're really focused on Congress now. Just yesterday, Ali Alexander, the Stop the Steal organizer, who was one of the motivating forces behind Saturday's rally, he and Ed Martin, his co-organizer, had a press conference where they basically were threatening Republican members of Congress who don't go along with these demands to challenge the Electoral College outcome, that they will take them out in the next primary election when they get a chance.
So it's not officially over yet, is it?
Not
Even though
quite.
the Electoral College has cast its vote, Biden is, as you say, the president-elect officially. Has Trump actually conceded? We don't know. It doesn't really matter, but it does matter to democracy, doesn't it? That's really what the takeaway from this whole thing. It seems like it's an assault on democracy itself, the undermining of the voting, the confidence in the voting system, which is the bedrock of American democracy.
Absolutely. And they're creating, they're continuing to push these false claims about the election having been stolen from Trump's voters. It's just fueling all these resentments that are going to last. They're going to last, well past the inauguration of Joe Biden. And we could be in for some violence, as some people on the right have called for violence. There are still people on the right, even people among the legal team that has been pushing these lawsuits, that are still calling on Trump to declare martial law rather than give up power, and to declare martial law and use the military to oversee a new election. So I think some of us will not really breathe easily until Joe Biden's hand is on the Bible and sworn in by the Supreme Court justice, and then we're good.
And hopefully he won't do a Jericho walk in front of the church, clearing protesters out of the way. Well, there'll be Trumpists in there. And of course, it did spill over into violence, didn't it, on the Jericho March? Because I'm not sure if it was officially part of the march, but you had the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and some of these other organizations show up. And there was a clash in Washington, D.C., and maybe in some of the other cities, because it wasn't just limited to D.C., was it? They had marches concurrently on the same day in some of the swing states that Biden had won as well.
That's right. They had rallies in the capitals of all what they're calling the contested states, the states that they insist were stolen from Trump, all those swing states. And yeah, the interesting thing, in Washington, we had that big rally on the National Mall, which was the Jericho March, but they're calling that specific event Let the Church Roar. And there was a competing event several blocks away in DC, put on by a different group of right-wing activists called the March for Trump. And that, I think, had more of the Proud Boys contingent.
Malicious.
And you're right, on Saturday night, we saw the Proud Boys in their uniforms and military gear kind of stalking the streets of DC, and they vandalized a few historic Black churches and beat some people up. And so that's that's troubling, because
It is troubling.
The kind of anger that Trump and his pals are fueling with these continued claims of a stolen election is really fueling that kind of resentment and violence outrage in some cases. Yeah,
it is. And I think I read somewhere in Washington State, my home state where I was born, somebody was shot as a part of some of those protests and then counter protests. And I can't remember which group it was. Maybe it was the Proud Boys or one of these other patriot, quote unquote, militia groups. But so I'm reading about my own home state, going, man, I mean, yeah, it's a real thing. This violence is literally spilling over into the streets, and Trump is inflaming that. And of course, the Christian right, as I've been showing in my bonus episodes on these failed Trump prophecies, all they're doing is they're parroting Trump's conspiracy theories to their own base. The millions of people that follow people like Kenneth Copeland and Dutch Sheets and Cindy Jacobs and Paula White and on and on and on. So they're just parroting the same party line, aren't they?
They are, and for them, it comes with the added spiritual punch that for them, it's not just that this election has been stolen from the voters, it's that God has willed Trump to be president. And so this is really a satanic attack. And so the Democrats and Biden are all part of, they're not just political opponents, but they're part of, the spiritual war between good and evil. And some of them have not yet been able to concede that Biden has won because they spent many months declaring that it was God's will that Trump would return to office, and he was prophesied to return to office. And so they're still hanging on to that somehow, even Eric Metaxas, who, is sort of fashions himself as a public intellectual, but has kind of become increasingly part of the wild conspiracy theory, right? He was the MC of the rally on Saturday, and he ended it by saying, we can't see the path, but God can, and God is going to make a path to victory the way he cleared a path through the Red Sea. So they are not giving up.
And that's another image of, well, I don't know if you call it genocide, but the armies of Pharaoh in the Bible drowned in the Red Sea when they tried to chase the Israelites through. So there's another instance of mass death surrounding this whole issue. Well, I'm interested to look at some of these specific things. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully people can see that. But this is the actual page. There's an organization. It's called jerichomarch.org. And this is really interesting because this is their About Us page. And here's the tagline. This was the promoting of the rally leading up to it. Jericho March TM, trademark. I love that. They had to trademark the name. And of course, they've got their quotes from Jericho on the side of the page. But Jericho March calls upon people of faith to prayer, fasting, and peaceful protest in the service of God and in defense of life, liberty, and justice. Now, what you said there were some Catholics. There was also some Orthodox or Messianic Jews as part of this. And so they say, people of God or whatever, people of faith. They also had, of course, Alex Jones and the guy from the Oath Keepers, which is a very concerning thing at this rally. And it's interesting the way they phrase the language. They say Jericho March is comprised of Judeo-Christians. So I love, we welcome Jews and Christians collectively praying to God to intercede, expose a particular darkness. So there's your spiritual warfare component, and bring about justice. As a community of believers, we take our petitions to heaven, and we know that our mighty and powerful God answers and can move mountains. And then they talk about the city of Jericho. It was a city of false gods and corruption. Just as Joshua was instructed to march around the walls of Jericho, Jericho marchers march around at a specific place and time until that darkness is exposed and the walls of corruption fall down. So that's exactly what you were saying. It's a metaphorical falling down of the wall. They didn't want the Capitol building to fall down, did they?
Right.
And then the last thing, the Jericho marches are also a unified celebration of authentic and diverse Judeo-Christian forms of worship, including praying, chanting, preaching, singing, rosary recitations, Eucharistic processions, and blowing shofars. There was a lot of that went on too. Individuals and groups on Jericho marches are self-led. There's a bunch of other stuff in there. But so you've got the spiritual warfare piece. You've got the Judeo-Christian. Any thoughts as I read through that you wanted to comment on?
Just that it's been a real long time effort on the religious right in the United States to sort of bring together right-wing evangelicals and right-wing Catholics and right-wing Pentecostal Christians, so that it is more than kind of the white fundamentalist evangelicals that people have always thought of as the religious right. So they have kind of made they brought together sort of ecumenical extremism.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Exactly.
and they set aside their theological differences. I'm sure that some of the people at the march didn't know what to make of some of the Catholic pieces, the
Hmm.
blessing of the image of the Virgin of Guadalupe, and some of the Catholic prayers for intercession by Mary, which certainly theologically the evangelicals and Pentecostals would have a problem with. But
Hmm.
this is really about Christian nationalism, and they are more than happy to put aside their denominational uh, and theological differences to advance
Yeah.
that goal, and to try to keep Trump in the White House. They're still
Whatever it
very
takes.
focused on him as uh, you know because they say uh, that when the Democrats take power, religious freedom is going to be uh, threatened, and that depending who you talk to, that Christianity is going to be criminalized in the United States. I mean, the fear mongering rhetoric about um, the Democratic Party supposedly being, just itching to shut down churches and impose some kind of godless communism. It's just ludicrous rhetoric, but
Hmm.
unfortunately, millions of people believe it, and
It works.
it's a powerful motivator to turn out conservative Christians.
Hmm. And I know I keep saying this on podcasts, but Conway and Siegelman, Holy Terror, 1980. That book was, decades ago. And that's the premise of their book, is that the Christian right is masterfully using fear tactics to keep its base motivated and in line and activated in the political sphere. And they're doing it, as you say, now. So you talked about Christian nationalism. This is interesting. This is where I think the Christian nationalism and the conspiracy theorist thinking comes into play, because reading on this is the About Us page on the Jericho March. This is the specific one, as you said, the Let the Church Roar March, which was the one in Washington, D.C. They say Jericho March for election integrity, transparency, and reform. Now, on the face of it, okay, that sounds good.
It's a good
But
thing.
then look at the threads that come together. Okay, so reading on, they say, our first Jericho March is for election integrity, transparency, and reform to preserve free and fair elections in America for this generation and generations to come. Okay, so far I'm all for it. Free from any corruption or interference, both foreign and domestic. I have no problem with that. Now, here comes the Christian nationalism. Are you ready for this? They say, America is a city on a hill and light to other nations, and God's favor is still upon her. So now here comes the Christian nationalism. We are proud of the American system of governance established by our founding fathers. And here comes the conspiracy. We will not let globalists, socialists, and communists destroy our beautiful nation by sidestepping our laws and suppressing the will of the American people through their fraudulent and illegal activities in this election. So here comes the conspiracy. Then the last sentence: mainstream media, big tech, and corrupt political machines want the world to believe that the 2020 election is over. We have a clear message to them. You do not call elections, and this election is far from over. You try to censor the truth, but we know the truth, and our God will reveal the truth. Oh, there's just so much in those two paragraphs, isn't there?
There is, and it's and you heard it over and over again from the stage on Saturday. I heard it at yesterday's press conference where Ali Alexander kind of closed it by saying that this is a spiritual battle, and that uh, you know this is a God thing, and Jesus is with us. And the rally on Saturday ending with sort of there is no hope for the United States um, except for the nation to turn back to God, to turn
Mm-hmm.
to Jesus. And so it is, the movement is really grounded in this history that has been promulgated by the religious right, that the U.S. was a Christian nation even before it was the United States. That the Pilgrims established a covenant with God, when they came to the United States 400 years ago this year. Some of the folks who are into numerology make a big deal out of the fact that this is the 400th anniversary of that arrival, but that the U.S. as a nation, not just Christians as individual worshipers or believers, that as a nation we have a covenant with God to advance the Christian faith. And so that makes everything that they see as falling away from that, whether it's secularism or public schools that don't teach the Bible, all of that they see as violating our covenant with God and requiring national repentance to bring about revival. And so some of these folks were involved in a big rally that we had on the National Mall back in September that was meant to be sort of a collective repentance that would allow God to grant mercy and forestall the judgment that we so deserve because of our wickedness, and would give us 4 more years of Trump, which would be extending the period of grace that we all experienced under Trump.
Yeah,
So,
that was the call, wasn't it? Was that the event with Jonathan Cahn?
that was Jonathan called. They called that the return.
Oh, the return. That's
That
what it
was
was.
America returning to God, and
Right.
yeah. So that was sponsored by Jonathan Cahn, and Jonathan Cahn
Right.
actually gave the closing keynote by video at Saturday's rally. So
Right. Okay. Yeah. There's your connection to that as well. He's the one who smashed the pots and all that, didn't he? And
yes,
this is a metaphor of what God will do or is doing to America. Yeah. Where's the dominionist piece in there? Because the only thing I could see in here, okay, they tie the Christian nationalism, America as a city on a hill and a light to other nations. That's kind of boilerplate evangelical sort of missional doublespeak, isn't it? But they're not saying we've got to take the world over and establish a theocracy, are they? At least that's if it's not in this paragraph.
yeah, no, and I think that might be that sort of reflects their effort to have this big tent. That they've got this is organized by a Catholic and a Pentecostal Christian, and so I think they're trying to keep that big tent language. Some of the other speakers on Saturday were clearly out of the Dominionist New Apostolic Reformation camp.
Yeah,
Lance
Cindy
Wallnau
Jacobs.
and
Yeah, I was
Cindy
gonna say.
Jacobs. So yeah,
No
so they
question
were
about
well
it.
represented.
Right. Now, there's some other really concerning thing. Well, one of the most, I don't know, hilarious / ironic, bizarre was the guy from My Pillow. He kept popping up and these advertisements kept showing up on the screen. So you got a split screen. One guy's ranting about conspiracy theories and election fraud and communists and big tech and mainstream media and communism and all the rest of it. And then you got a My Pillow commercial on the other screen. What the hell?
That has become a feature of all these right-wing events because he is funding the live streaming of all these Trump rallies and Stop the Steal rallies. And so he's, and that's how they, get a big audience, is that, they get however many people show up to their events, but then they live stream them and host those videos, and he's paying for a lot of that. So a lot of these Trump rallies are interrupted with ads or with, the hosts giving sort of personal testimonials about Mike Lindell and My Pillow.
The perfect blend of capitalism and evangelical dominion theology, wacky conspiracy. And there was even I saw, because there was a code you could use if you went on the My Pillow website and bought their thing that was on sale. If you put in the code, I think it was Eric, for Eric Metaxas.
Yes.
you could get a discount on a My Pillow by using Eric as your code.
Right, which made me wonder how much of a cut does Eric get from that?
How much money did they make off the back of that one rally? I'd love to know what My Pillow raked in off of that gig. I mean, it's just crazy. But now, okay, so we have My Pillow, but then you've got Alex Jones showing up. Now I'm going to play this clip. This is the Stop the Steal and Jericho March that we've been talking about. Alex Jones popped. I'm only going to play about a minute of it because it's just insanity.
Yeah! Praise God, America is awakening. Humanity Obama, not Joe Biden, but Jesus Christ is King. And God gave us and rose up Donald Trump to stand against the enemy and draw out the enemy. So as dark as some of these days are, understand this is the beginning of the great revival before the Antichrist comes.
Okay, we can't play much more of that. That's just crazy talk. I mean, what more did he say? I mean, did you watch the rest of Alex Jones' craziness?
Sure. I mean, it was kind of more along more of the same, really, and some kind of threatening, vaguely threatening language about people rising up if the elected leaders don't. But yeah, it's amazing to see how seamlessly he blended all the conspiracy theory stuff that he's known for with the Christian nationalism and this kind of Trump is the messenger of God to defeat the enemies of darkness.
Is this new territory for Alex Jones? I mean, I wasn't aware that he was any sort of quote unquote evangelical. I mean, obviously he's a alt-right type figure, massive conspiracy theorist. I've never heard him publicly advocate his apparent faith in Jesus, or does he consider himself a Christian? That's news to me.
Well, he clearly does. I don't recall hearing a lot of that from him in the past. It may be that it's part of his effort to rebuild an audience after he was deplatformed by some places, and so that this right-wing Christianity seems to be a fertile ground for making money in the United States, and he may have figured that out.
Yeah. Now here's another concerning clip. This is from your guys' website on the Right Wing Watch. So thanks to the Right Wing Watch for this. This is Stewart Rhodes. So here's another. So you got Alex Jones appearing at a supposedly, I wouldn't say it was an evangelical rally, would you? It's an interfaith rally, people of faith. But you've got Alex Jones popping up. Now you've got this Stewart Rhodes, who's from the Oath Keepers, which is it's a far right militia group, isn't it? Yes. So he gave a few words.
SOCOM to go seize all the files, all the databases, and he's to free Julian Assange and put him in charge of doing a data dump to display to all of you all the skeletons out of the closet into the streets. Show the world who the traitors are, and then use the Insurrection Act to drop the hammer on them. And all of us veterans who swore that oath, until you're age 65, you can be called up as the militia to support and defend the Constitution. He needs to know from you that you are with him, that if he does not do it now while he is commander-in-chief, we're going to have to do it ourselves later in a much more desperate, much more bloody war. Let's get it on now while he is still the commander-in-chief. Hooah!
Okay. So that was Stewart Rhodes from the Oath Keepers. I mean, that's going beyond just conspiracy theories. Now we're talking about he's saying Trump needs to invoke the Insurrection Act while he's still in office, and there's going to be a bloody civil war at some point.
Yeah, I mean, he's calling for Trump to declare martial law and to execute his opponents, and saying that if Trump doesn't do that, we the right-wing militia movement, and so that's
wow.
Yeah, I hope the FBI was paying attention to that one.
Yeah, I hope so. And of course, it wasn't just him, because what did Michael Flynn say, as well as General McInerney, just about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago? They both appeared on various media platforms, essentially saying a similar line. What do you remember what Flynn and McInerney were saying?
I don't remember exactly what McInerney said, but Flynn is out there calling for Trump to invoke martial law and use the military to oversee a new election. So yeah, and so Flynn has been out there saying that, and Flynn was like a rock star at this past weekend's events. He showed up at sort of a early, smaller gathering. It was at the Supreme Court, and then he was on the main stage on the National Mall. People really love him.
Yeah, I did an episode a while back. I featured the Christian radio show Stand in the Gap Radio. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but
Sure.
Sam Lohr
Pastors
is the
Network.
host. Yeah, so they had a guy on there. I don't know if you're familiar with this guy, but his name's Leo Hohmann. Have you heard of Leo Hohmann?
Sounds familiar, but I don't know him as well.
There's so many characters out there.
Yes.
Leo Hohmann, he bills himself as an independent journalist and freelance reporter. He also writes for WorldNet Daily, which is another conspiracy theory, far right platform, news, quote unquote platform. And they played some clips from what you were talking about from Michael Flynn saying that on a radio show or a TV show, that he was saying, yeah, there's an executive order that Trump signed back in September of 2018. I don't know if you know about this, but I need to look into this, where he can declare an emergency and suspend everything and basically overturn the whole thing. And they were calling for him to do that as well.
Yeah, there are provisions in law, and there are things like that are designed for when if there's a nuclear war, if there's something going on, there are provisions that in an emergency can give the president extraordinary powers, and so they are saying this is that. They're saying this is war, and some of them are trying to make it a war so that he would have the power to do that. They're saying that this was communist China. Communist China attacked us with the COVID-19 virus to try to destroy Trump's presidency. And,
China virus.
Right. And so they have been trying to stir up war with China, basically, rhetorically, and some not so rhetorically, as a way of saying that this is not just a contested election, but this was this, along with the COVID virus, was an act of war against the U.S. by the Chinese Communist government, and that's there's a pretty good number of people out there pushing that strain of thinking.
And that's what they were talking about on this episode of Stand in the Gap, which I covered in that bonus episode. They were talking about, they said it's a Marxist, Leninist, Stalinist, communist coup. That's what we're seeing, that somehow money flowed through from communist China through maybe even Cuba and Venezuela. Somehow the ghost of Hugo Chavez was involved in the Dominion voting machines. And this is all a big communist plot to overturn and actually to put their man in the office, because they figured we don't want Trump because he's kicking our ass basically in this trade war. We need Biden. So China is somehow behind the whole thing. Communist China, so another conspiracy theory.
Absolutely. I mean, that's out there today. I mean, that's
true.
That's
Sidney Powell.
And and depending who you're talking to, they'll add in there the global satanic pedophile network. That was part of what Alex Jones was talking about in his long rant.
So we got QAnon in there now.
Into the QAnon conspiracy. That's something else we have to look forward to, is we have a couple Q people coming into Congress next year. So
So there's some really big stuff coming up, because obviously we've got in about a month now the inauguration. So a lot can happen between now and January. There's the Georgia runoff race, which is huge, isn't it? And there's all this stuff. Maybe we talked about, I know I should let you go in a few minutes, but what we've been talking about, just so listeners are aware of this, we kicked this around before we started hitting record, that maybe Peter and I could meet maybe about once a month and do a little video analysis like we're doing now, and sort of bring news of the day, and we can discuss it and talk about it. So if you have any things that come to your attention, bring it to me or Peter, and we'll kick it around. But if you're up for it, maybe, are you up for maybe meeting right after the inauguration, and then we can kick around? So just a little bit more than a month, maybe we can meet up again if you're up for it, and then we can kind of see what's happened in the last, since we did this recording.
Sure. One of the things that Ali Alexander said at the end of the rally is that he is planning to try to marshal his troops to come back to DC for the inauguration and set up some kind of a occupation style protest. He told people to bring tents. So he is encouraging people to just never give in, never recognize the legitimacy of incoming President Biden. So yeah, we'll have stuff to talk about.
Well, I've been getting letters. Two people sent me different letters. We mentioned this before we hit record, but one guy I'd never heard of him. His name's Dr. Gordon Klingenschmidt. He calls himself Dr. Chaps, and turns out you know who he is. He's been sending out letters to pastors in Georgia. He runs a ministry called Pray in Jesus' Name or something like that. He turns out he's a disgraced former Navy chaplain who got booted out of the Navy, which there's a whole backstory to that.
Yes.
And then on his letter, there's his board of advisors. And the second one down from the top is Judge Roy Moore from Alabama. So Judge Roy Moore is on his board of advisors. So we've got a lot to talk about. Then the other letter someone sent me was from Dutch Sheets. And he's sending this letter out, which is like a declaration, like he's putting out a lawsuit to God and declaring that in the courts of heaven, Trump should regain victory. I mean, it is beyond bizarre. So we need to talk about Dutch Sheets as well as Gordon Klingenschmidt, Dr. Chaps.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So things to look forward to. So thank you so much, Peter. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule. We will talk again. It sounds like just after the election, I'll hook up with you and people can have a look at what we talk about. Hopefully we can get into some good analysis. All right. Thanks, Peter. Take care.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Okay. Yeah, take care. Bye.